Hi, welcome to video number 6 in our 9-part series designed to help you prepare for the Salesforce Public Sector Solutions Accredited Professional Exam. In this video, we'll be diving into the next key focus area, PSS data models and applications for grant management and grant making. In this video, we'll take a close look at the difference between grant management and grant making, which is critical for the PSS AP exam and also implementation considerations. We'll go over their associated data models and use cases. Whether you are gearing up for the PSS AP exam or deciding whether you need grant management or grant making for your Salesforce org, or simply want to deepen your understanding of the data model or implementation of grant management or grant making, this video will be valuable to you. Additionally, I'll walk you through some potential exam questions and highlight the key parts you need to focus on during your exam preparation. Let's get into it. Alright, in today's video, we'll first be covering off the difference between grants management and grant making. This will be followed by a partner learning camp notes summary, Trailhead notes, data model, and help article summary. So first off, we'll be covering the difference between grants management and grant making. So grant making was actually added directly into PSS in Spring 23 release, while grant capabilities were previously delivered through a separate grants management managed package. So as of October 2024, the exam is still based on the Summer 22 release. What this means is that the exam will still test you on grants management managed package, not grant making. So the business process and the use cases for grants management and grant making is quite similar. The key difference is actually the data model, which we'll cover in this video. So be sure to get familiar with the grants management managed package objects for the PSS exam. We'll then go over partner learning camp notes. This will be focused on grant making. So the key thing to remember is that partner learning camp resource does not contain grants management content, which is included in the PSS exam, unfortunately. But the business process are quite similar, so a lot of what we'll be covering in PLC notes will be applicable. We'll still focus on grant making, but I'll be outlining the difference and similarities between the grants management and grant making. I'll be calling out the key points that you'll need to remember for the exam, and we'll do the same with Trailhead notes as well, which does not contain grants management content, just like partner learning camp notes. This will be followed by data models. We'll go into details and outline the similarities and key differences between grant making and grants management. In terms of help article notes, we'll be covering both grant making and grants management quickly. We'll go over the key pages that you need to know for implementation and also for the exam. For those that are preparing for the PSS AP exam, we'll be covering PSS 1.4, which is about giving a set of business use cases relating to grants management implementation and setting up and configuring grants management. Before we get into the content today, it's important to know the permission setting licenses. This will be critical for the PSS exam. So we'll cover of the permission setting licenses for grants management first, and then we'll cover the grant making one. So for grants management, there are 3 permission sets. First one is grants management base access. This one basically provides you with basic access to Apex classes that are required to use grants management, and these are typically assigned to internal users who need to use grants management. We have grants management review workplace, configure workplace permission set. So this allows the user to read, write, edit reviews and review the review workspace. So these are typically for Salesforce admins and grant makers who create reviews and configure review workspaces. And we have Grants Management Review Workspace Evaluate Funding Request. So this allows the users to read and edit reviews, and these are for Salesforce admins and grant makers who review funding requests. Moving to Grantmaking. So for internal CRM users, we'll be giving them the Grantmaking Manager permission set. For Experience Cloud users, we'll be giving them the Grantmaking for Experience Cloud permission set. So these permission sets basically include access to Grantmaking objects and field, Grantmaking system permissions, and auto assigns the Grantmaking permission set license when you use these permission sets. In terms of resources, I'll provide in these links in the description or comment section below. We'll be providing a couple of links for the Grants Management Managed package and a few resources for Grantmaking, which includes Trailhead modules, hub articles, and the data model. Alright, let's have a look at the difference between Grants Management and Grantmaking. So in summary, Grantmaking is a core component of the public sector solutions that provides end-to-end grant management capabilities and receives seasonal updates from Salesforce. Grants Management Managed package offers very similar grant management capabilities. However, it's only compatible with the nonprofit cloud, and it's not likely to receive any new feature updates from Salesforce, with the last update dating back to 2022. This package also lacks security guarantees from Salesforce, and it lacks many of the objects that the Grantmaking data model and the PSS common layer offers. Let's take a look at the key difference. So in terms of the solution type, Grantmaking is Salesforce Core, which is part of the PSS, while the Grant Management Managed package, it's a managed package. In terms of compatibility, Grantmaking is part of the PSS, so it's compatible. If you are using PSS, it's an out-of-the-box functionality. In terms of the compatibility for Grants Management Managed package, it's only compatible with nonprofit cloud. And if we look at this link on the App Exchange, you can see that it's only compatible with the nonprofit cloud. In terms of Salesforce release updates, Grantmaking is receiving Salesforce updates. So you can take a look at some of these release notes. For example, Summer 24, we can see these new features that are being added. While we wait for the page to load, for Grant Management Managed package, it's unlikely to get any new features and receive Salesforce updates. The latest release was back in April 2022. So this is the release notes for Summer 24. You can see it's still receiving quite a few different new features. And if we look at the Grants Management, it was released in 2020 with the latest update dated back to April 2022. When we look at the security aspect, Grantmaking is a SFDC application, while the Grant Management Managed package is a non-SFDC application. What this means is that the security requirements reviews, Salesforce basically makes no guarantees about the quality and the security of this solution. Alright, let's take a look at the difference between Grantmaking data model and the Grants Management data model. So take a quick look at these. We'll go into this in a much more detail later in the video. On the left here, this is the Grantmaking public sector solutions data model, And on the right here, that's the data model for the Grants Management Managed package. So starting with the program object, you can think of a program as a scholarship program, for example, a scholarship program for computer science students. And underneath the program, you have funding opportunities. So these can be scholarships for year 1 students, scholarship for master students. And in the grants management package world, the equivalent of program is the funding program object, and funding opportunity as the funding request. So these differences are quite important, especially when it comes to the PSS exam. As of now, the exam is still based on the summer 22 release, and this is prior to the grant-making package coming out and being integrated to the public sector solutions. So you'll need to familiarize yourself with the objects that are listed here, and there are quite a few questions on this. So as we go through the video, I'll be highlighting some of the potential exam questions for grants management. So make sure to remember to focus on those areas. Down here we have a table for data object mapping between the two for grant making and grant management managed package. Again, we'll go through these quickly. We'll dive into much more detail later on in the video. So we've covered program and funding opportunity, funding program, funding request. So with grant making, there are objects called funding opportunity participant and participant role. In the grants management managed package world, you have funding request collaborator, funding request collaborator invitation, and funding request role. So in grant making, if you look at this funding opportunity participant, the role is actually not in this data model here, but by default, the funding opportunity participant and participant role won't be enabled unless you enable it via compliant data sharing in the setting. So basically what this does is that it allows internal and external collaborators to be added to collaborate on the same funding opportunity. And this was actually a new feature that was introduced in Spring 24 release. And this compliant sharing for the funding opportunity participants is actually covering the functionalities of these three object models in the grants management package. So when we talk about scholarships or funding, there's always disbursement involved, and in the grant making world, there's the funding disbursement object and funding awards that would allow you to manage the disbursement of the funding, which is what's covered over here. And in the grants management world, it's called disbursement. We have budget as well. So in grant making, you can see a whole section on budget related objects, while in grants management, the budget management object, it's not as extensive as what you are seeing in grant making. There's also budget allocation for both. So budget allocation over here and budget allocation over here. And as we mentioned earlier, there's a bunch of other objects that are related to budgeting that's not available in the grant management managed package. There's action plans for For both of these, you can see action plans here as well, and also document checklist items to help you manage the application. And this is available for both, but the naming is slightly different. In here, it's document checklist items. In here, it's called document checklist. And a key difference between the two is that it's this individual application object. Grant Management Managed Package does not have these application-related objects, which is used for keeping application-related data for panel members to review application records. And what we are talking about is this entire section here about applications, which is missing over here. We have the application review object for grant making. So this allows you to keep track of the comments by the reviewers. And over here, it's just called the review. And for grant making, there is a bunch of objects that allow you to track the funding award and the funding award requirements and amendments. So funding award requirements are basically used to record anything that's required post the award. For example, for every year, you might to be able to be eligible for the scholarship for example, a 3-year scholarship. Every year you need to upload your academic transcript, and this is where the funding award requirement is for. And this capability is missing in grants management. So don't worry if some of these contain a lot of details that you might not understand yet. We'll go into this in much more detail later in the video. Now let's dive into the Partner Learning Camp notes. As of November 2024, the exam is now based on the Summer 24 release. However, the exam outline still refers to grants management, and it's unclear whether this points to the Grants Management Managed Package or grant making. Therefore, it's crucial to be familiar with both. While the Partner Learning Camp mainly focuses on grant making, I'll be comparing and highlighting the differences between grant making and the Grants Management Managed Package where relevant, so you are fully prepared for the exam, no matter which one it covers. So in this section, we'll be covering objectives, benefits, and value of the grant making solution. We'll be providing examples of the different challenges across the grants lifecycle. We'll be identifying stakeholders responsible for implementing the grant-making solution and resolving implementation challenges, and also applying the technical knowledge and considerations to configure the grant-making solution. Alright, let's dive into grant-making. So grant-making solution in Salesforce helps businesses to manage and track the grant-making lifecycle. And as we've mentioned, you have two options available. One is the integrated platform solutions, which is grant-making, and the managed packages, that's the Grants Management Managed Package. And Partner Learning Camp will be based on the grant-making, which is part of the public sector solutions core. But I'll be making references and comparisons to the Grants Management Managed Package, so we are prepared for the exam. Alright, here comes the scenario. So you have a small business owner who runs a tea shop, and because of the pandemic, this results in the business owner having to close the shop because of the pandemic. And as a result of this, the shop owner has faced issues with the revenue, and her employee needs to rely on the income from the business owner, and the bills are starting to come in. So she needs to find a solution there. So the place where the business owner lives, there's a department that provides pandemic relief fund to keep small businesses running during these difficult times. This department has adopted Salesforce PSS, and as part of this, they have Grantmaking available to help with providing relief to affected businesses. So one of the advantages with the Grantmaking solution is that it's quick to configure and deploy, and it provides visibility across the entire funding lifecycle in a single platform, as opposed to having multiple Excel sheets and systems that tracks the entire grant-making cycle. So as part of this, you can do a lot of scalability. You can have the 360 view of constituent view because it's all within a single platform, and there's engagement that you can do directly and workflow automations you can configure, and also of course the real-time reporting that you can run. So how would the business owner actually apply for this fund? With PSS and the Grantmaking solution, there's a digital front door into the relief program, so it provides the applicant with a digital first experience where she can find and applies for the grants faster. It creates a profile to upload the documentation. She can view her application status and also submit ongoing reports. And for the development officials, there's increases in productivity as well for the grants management process because it's simplified with a single system that manages the entire life cycle of the grant making process and also manages stakeholders and programs. And this eliminates paper-based processes with digital first tools, which promotes collaboration and increases the efficiency when it comes to application reviews and also decision making and approval. And with the grant-making solution, it allows the management team to quickly review and approve the grant application for this relief program, which helps the business owner to stay in business. At the same time, the officials are able to streamline the application process to improve the review time and also help other small businesses in the community. It also allows easy auditing as everything is in one place and increases the production of reports and executive level summaries through dashboards and reporting. Let's now go over some of the keywords that are used in grant making. So what exactly is a grant? So a grant is basically a way for the government to fund ideas and projects to provide public services and stimulate the economy. It supports recovery initiatives, research, and other programs. Funding opportunities. So a funding opportunity is an initiative that's run by an organization that intends to allocate funding. So for example, we talked about the relief grant for COVID that the business is applying for. So this is a type of funding opportunity. So you might ask, what are the difference between these two? You can think of grants as a type of funding opportunities, but sometimes, depending on the context, these two terms can be used interchangeably. So in Salesforce's context, both grants and funding opportunities that provide quite an important role in supporting PSS and grant-making initiatives. However, depending on the context, they might serve different purposes and target different entities or projects. Another way to look at grants is that grants typically refer to financial assistance provided by government bodies to nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, or other entities for specific projects or activities. And it's quite common that grants may come with specific guidelines, requirements, and reporting obligations. Funding opportunities. So funding opportunities encompass a broader range of financial support mechanisms. While grants are a form of funding opportunity, this term can also include other types of financial assistance, such as contracts, agreements, or sponsorships. So in summary, while both grants and funding opportunities involve financial support, grants typically refer to specific monetary awards provided for particular service, whereas funding opportunities encompasses a wider range of financial mechanisms for supporting initiatives in the public sector, including grants as well as other forms of financial support. So here are the three personas that are involved in the grant process. We have the grant maker, who are basically the internal grant-making users who usually work in the government organization. So these are the people who perform grant-making duties, such as reviewing applications and setting up disbursements. You have the grant seeker, so this is the person who's actually seeking funding from an organization. They are usually the ones that visit the portal and apply to programs directly. Or these grant seekers can get invited from the grant makers. And you have the grantee, so these are the people who's been awarded the funding from an organization as a result of the individual application. So three key benefits why a lot of the government organizations are digitalizing the grants management process. Reason one is increased access. So this is usually via a digital website that provides digital engagement as opposed to filling up an application form on paper or a PDF form. Reason two, it provides accelerated reviews because there is not a single source of truth, so you haven't got to go to multiple systems or Excel spreadsheets to find where the application is at. And the benefit with keeping everything in Salesforce is that it can provide you with good reporting insights, and you can measure success and identify improvements based on the insights that you get from reports and dashboards. Let's go over a simple application scenario. So in the example that we've gone over earlier, the department is considered the grant maker, and the government officials are basically in charge of reviewing and selecting applicants. The local business here, they are the ones that are seeking grants for their businesses, and these people are considered as grant seekers. So after someone has been selected for a grant, you become a grantee. And a grantee are the ones that is awarded the funding. So using PSS for grants management, it helps speed up the review process and get help to those that needs the funding faster. And one thing to note with the notes that we are going over here is that a lot of the grants management and grant making terms, they are used interchangeably, so it's quite important to just keep this at the back of your mind. And as we mentioned earlier, grant making and Grants Management Managed Package, the business processes are the same. It's only the data model that's different, which we'll go into a bit later on. So when it comes to grants management process for an organization, there are typically quite a wide range of departments across the government that are involved. You have the grants leadership team, communications team, grants operations, audit, and IT. And here are some of the titles that you might see within the government organization that are involved in the grants management process. So for example, grants management officer, program officer, director of grant programs. When it comes to the communication team, you have the chief communications officer, communications and outreach. And in grants operations, you usually have grants manager, grants writer, coordinator, associate director, and acquisition support group. In IT, you have the CIO, CTO, IT director, architect director, tech and business support manager, technical management division. In terms of audit, you have audit director, GL director, not sure what this stands for, admin actions and appeals advisor, compliance officer, and office of program compliance. Alright, so grant making helps grant makers to manage the entire grant making process, and it extends their Salesforce instance to give them a 360 view of their funding programs through planning, delivery, and evaluation stages. And the important thing to know here is that there's a site template for Experience Cloud that helps you to create an online portal quickly to communicate and collaborate with the grantees. And this is one of the Experience Cloud site template example for grant making. So now that we know grant making and its process very well, let's dive into the Salesforce framework for managing grants. So the tools that we have within PSS for grant making, it provides features that are designed to manage funding opportunities, set grant budgets, review grant applications, award grants, and manage disbursements on an ongoing basis. Alright, let's take a look at the first key object, which is the program object. So the program object in Salesforce in PSS allows you to create programs for funding or grant making purposes. So a few examples you can think of is you can have a program for renewable energies, and you can also have a program for example, science scholarships. You have the budget object over here, which allows you to set spending for each programs, and it allows you to track grant making budgets as well for programs, projects, or departments. And you can set up budgets for the amount of money available for a program each year, and there's also options for applicants to submit project budget when they apply, which can be created from templates. We also have funding opportunity. So these funding opportunities, you can use this to manage the available grant opportunities. And these records basically include descriptions of the available grants, application instructions, and start and end dates. So these funding opportunities can be displayed through Experience Clouds. So when the applicants come in, they can see a list of funding opportunities that are available. So if we think about an example here, we talked about the renewable energy program. The funding opportunity can be a research project to improve efficiency of electric cars, for example. So this can be one of the funding opportunities. And in the scholarship example, when we talk about the science scholarship, the funding opportunity can be science scholarship for university students. Let's quickly go to the data model for grant making and grant management for these three objects. So we'll talk about grant making first, then we'll move on to grant management. So we'll start with the program object. In here, you can see this parent-child relationship. So this allows you to create program hierarchies. So if you have a parent program for science scholarships, the child programs can be science scholarships for different states or regions. And as you can see here, there's this one-to-many relationship between program and funding opportunities. What this will allow you to do is within a program, you can set up multiple funding opportunities. So in the case of science scholarship for a particular state, you can have a funding opportunity for high school students, a funding opportunity for university students, for example. You can also see this one-to-many relationship here as well, with between program and budget. So this allows you to have multiple budgets per program, and this allows you to track other things as well, which will go into this in a bit more detail. And one important thing to note here is that there is this one-to-many relationship between budget and funding opportunities. So what this will allow you to do is that on the funding opportunity object, you can select the budget that you want to track this funding opportunity against. So for example, you have a budget for 2024 math scholarship for a particular state. Underneath this, you might have 20 science scholarships they are checking against this budget object. Now let's move on to Grants Management Managed Package. So we talked about the program object over here being the overall overarching object that's a container that basically sits above funding opportunities and budget. In the grants management world, you have the funding program. So instead of program, you have funding program. And instead of funding opportunities, you have funding request. And again, this is this relationship here. The self relationship allows you to set up hierarchies, similar to what you're able to do here as well. And again, this one-to-many relationship between the funding program and funding request, which is the funding opportunity in the grant making world. In grants management, you also have the budget object here as well, and this is a bit different to here, where there is no established relationship between the funding program, funding request, and the budget object here. All right, moving back to the notes. We'll now take a look at individual applications. So individual applications is basically an object that allows you to track the application from start to finish. For example, the status and application dates, etc. So these can be set up on the Experience Cloud site using OmniStudio, OmniScript, or Flow. And in your OmniScript or Flow Builder, you can set up your automation to create individual application records. And applicants can also submit their own budget based on the template provided through Experience Cloud sites. We'll cover that in a bit. You also have the application review object. So this allows you to capture feedback from the internal team who's going through these applications and reviewing them. So this object allows you to keep track of the feedback and the review, and it provides a way of standardizing how internal teams review these applications. And you can set up automation, action plans, document checklists, and approval processes for this. There are also other objects that are quite important when it comes to grant making. So to check decisions whether your application has been approved or not, you can use the application decision object, and you can use the funding award object to keep track of the award when someone has been awarded the scholarship or the grant. Any money that's going out to the grantees, you can use the funding disbursement object. And any additional steps a grantee must take, like submitting annual reports after you've been granted the scholarship or government funding, you can use the funding award requirements to check this. Now let's quickly take a look at the data models. So we talked about individual applications which will contain details such as application date, the status, and responses to the application form. So we can see a funding opportunity can have many individual applications from various different applicants, which are represented by personal account. So one important thing to remember is for grant making to work, you need to enable personal accounts. And you also have the relationship between budget and individual applications, so you can make use of the budget object with individual applications as well. We talked about funding award and also application decision. So whatever the decision is with the application, you can use this to keep track. And funding award, if you've been awarded the funding, you can use this object to track as well. And if there's any money that's going out to the applicant, you use the funding disbursement object to track. Now moving on to grant management. One of the key differences here is that you'll notice in grants management there's actually no individual application object here. So that's one of the limitations here. If you are using the old grants management package in your org, you might need to set up a custom object to keep track of the application details. However, other objects are available here, such as disbursement. So in the grant making world, it's called funding disbursement, but here it's just called disbursement. And you have the funding award requirements. So this is also available here as well. And we'll go into this in a bit as well, explaining what exactly funding requirements are and what it allows you to do. So one object that we forgot to mention here is application review. So there is a relationship between application review and individual applications and also the user. So for each application, you can actually have multiple reviews done by different people, and this allows you to keep track of different review comments done by different assessors. So in the grants management world, the application review object is just called the review, and again, instead of individual applications, because we haven't got that available here, it's instead associated with the funding request. And the user object here as well, there is a relationship to allow you to review the funding request, basically. So one key point here to remember is that because grants management does not have individual application object, the details for the application will actually be kept in funding request in the grants management package. Now let's go back to the notes to have a look at a few examples. So grant-making organizations, they face a lot of challenges and a lot of admin processes like collecting feedback, entering budget data. So grant-making will help organizations like this to host applications on the Experience Cloud site, which allows the application to be reviewed, to be decided, everything on one platform instead of scattered around in different spreadsheets and paper forms. And it also allows the organizations to work with grantees to file their budget numbers directly into Salesforce through the Experience Cloud portal, so everything is in one place, which improves the efficiency and makes reviewing a lot easier. And because everything is in one place, the communication between the applicants and the grantees can be done very easily, and the communication can be streamlined, and it helps improve the granting experience and program outcomes. And here's just a quick review of the key objects. So if you need to create a grant program, you use the program object. To set spending for each program, you use the budget object. To manage the grant opportunities, you use the funding opportunities. To track the grant applications, you use the individual application object. Feedback, you use the application review. And to track money going out to grantees, you use funding disbursement. So for the exam, it's important to know these key objects, and both for grant making and grants management managed package. So if you need to create a grant program in the grants management world, you need to use the funding program object. And to check the budget, it's the same object, which is budget. For managing grant opportunities, instead of funding opportunities, you'll be using the funding request object. And to track grant applications, because grant management does not have individual applications or application object, again, you'll be tracking this either using custom object or using the funding request object here. For capturing feedback, instead of the application review object in grant making, in grants management, you'll be using the review object. And finally, for tracking money instead of funding disbursements, you'll be using the disbursement object instead. Let's now quickly go over what a grant-making lifecycle can look like. So usually there are 4 phases. The first one is the admin phase. So the grant makers, they usually work internally to determine the program budgets and create opportunities for potential grantees. So once this is done, you go into the pre-award phase, which is when the grant makers collect Grantseeker applications, and this is usually done via an Experience Cloud site. Moving on to the award phase, this is when the grant makers select grantees and disperse grants. And then you have the post-award phase, which is when the grant makers would work with grantees, collect progress reports and analyze results. So we'll quickly go over the details of each phase. So during the first phase, which is the administrative phase, this is when you need to start creating programs in Salesforce using a program object. Then you need to set the budgets. So this is when you use the budget object, which will help you manage and track complex budgets. And this can be broken down to categories and period. So what you usually do is you start by creating a high-level budget for a program, and you later allocate spending back to the budget categories, and you have child budgets for grants or particular initiatives. So once this is set up, each grant will be tracked using a funding opportunity object, and these records usually include a description of the grant, the instructions for applications, application deadlines, start and end date. And what you can also do is you can actually create a budget template for each funding opportunity for the applicants to use when they apply. And as we talked about earlier, funding opportunities can be listed on the Experience Cloud site for potential applicants to review and apply. So usually you'll have an Experience Cloud site to interact with grant seekers and grantees. So an Experience Cloud site will look like this. So here is just an example of the applicant filling up an individual application and filling up the budget that's associated with this individual application for review. So the benefit with having an Experience Cloud site is that it will make the communication between grant seekers, grant makers, and grantees very easily, and the grantees and grant seekers can come back to the site and keep track of the application process instead of having to call the help desk or contact the grant makers to ask for the application progress. So next you have the award phase. So this is where you start reviewing the applications and start doing the scoring for the applications, and typically this is done using the application review object in Grantmaking, and this is where you can collect and track feedback from the reviewers. You can add fields and customize the object to fit the grantmaker's process and also the information that need to be collected. And usually to ensure this review process is standardized, you usually have automation tools like action plans, document checklists, and approval processes to ensure everyone is following the same review process. So after the review and scoring is complete, you will use the application decision object to track if the application has been denied or awarded. If it's been awarded, you will use the funding award object to keep track of the amount of awards and relate its budgets, funding award requirements, and funding disbursements. So you use the funding disbursement object to track payments to a grantee, and funding award requirements to track the things that you need before a payment is made. For example, you create a funding award requirement record with an initial disbursement record for the first payment, but that disbursement is dependent on the requirements for a signed contract and a revised budget. Moving to the final phase, which is the post-award phase. So this is where the money has been disbursed to the grantees, and they are now very busy working towards their goals in this phase. Typically, the grant makers will want some type of progress reports or financial reports, budgets, and they want to monitor the outcomes. This is where you will use the funding award requirements, and funding disbursements also remain quite important during this phase. So you would use the funding award requirements to track work on interim and final reports, site inspections, audits, and related grant disbursements for these post-award activities. So if anything has been changed, for example, the amount, scope, timeline, or something else changes for the grant, you can actually track changes using the funding award amendment object. And here's just a quick summary. So when you determine the grant program budgets and create opportunities, you are in the administrative phase. This will be followed by collecting Grantseeker applications, which is the pre-award phase. You then select grantees and disburse grants in the award phase, and finally you work with grantees and collect reports and analyze the results in the post-award phase. Now let's take a look at some Salesforce records for grant making. We'll start with the program object. So in this object, in this example, the program itself is called Access to Nutritious Food, and you can record the start and end date, summary, additional context, and also the status. In the related list, you can see child programs, budgets, funding awards, funding opportunities, and program enrollments, benefits, and case programs. So we've covered this earlier in the video, but let's take a look at this again. So what we are talking about here is this program object, which is related to funding opportunities and budgets. And we'll take a look at these two records shortly. So once you've created the program object, you now have to set the budget. And this is what a budget record looks like. So for example, the name for this budget is Access to Nutritious Food, and you have a budget amount, a period name, start date, end date, the status, and also a lookup to the program. In your budget related list, you have a bunch of related records, allocation categories, budget period, and child budgets. And if we look at the data model here, this is what it's showing over here. You have the budget, and there's a bunch of objects that allows you to track different categories, the period, allocation, and participants. Moving back to this, we'll now take a look at budget category values and periods. When it comes to budget categories, you can include different spending areas, for example, supplies or personnel. For periods, these are basically the span of the time used to track the category, for example, monthly or quarterly. And this is what it looks like. So for the budget to access to nutritious food, we have set up a couple of budget categories, one for personnel, the other one for supplies and materials. And for budget periods, we have set up 4 quarters with different start date and end dates. And one of the benefits with the budget object is that once you've set all of this up, it'll display in a budget component, landing web component. In here, you have the budget category, personnel, supplies, and material. You'll display the budget periods for each quarter, and you can set up different planned amount for each category per quarter. So when it comes to entering the budget values, the grant makers and grant seekers can enter budget values using this budget component. Grant makers can enter these details in Salesforce, and for grant makers, still you need to use this on the Experience Cloud side. The important thing here to know is that when you use this budget record as a template, don't set any budget values. Instead, you associate the budget record to a funding opportunity. So if we look at the object model here, this is what we are talking about. So if you want to use this as a template, you'll need to associate. You'll need to have the association between funding opportunity and the budget record. And what this will allow you to do is that the applicant will have the ability to use this template to enter their proposed budget for the internal team to review. So we've now covered the budget component. So how do you actually track the actual budget spend? So this is actually done using the budget allocation object, and you can check the spending against the submitted budget. So allocations along with related funding disbursement records can track all the money or non-monetary grants going to the grantees. And this is what it looks like on the data model. So for budget allocation, what you can see here is that this budget allocation here, you have the budget object here, and there's this one-to-many relationship here, and this indicates how the budget is being spent and where the budget allocation is being funded by. And this budget allocation is associated with the funding disbursement and also the budget category value, which is the value that's entered in the proposed budget that we've talked about, that LWC component for the budget. So what this will allow you to do is this will allow you to be able to track the values in the budget and also the monetary value or non-monetary resources that's being dispersed to the awarded applicant. Now moving on to managing the funding opportunities. So this is what a funding opportunity record will look like. You would have the name of the funding opportunity, in this case food systems development. And you will have the program that's associated with this funding opportunity. So in this case, it's what we've been talking about, which is access to nutritious food. And with every funding opportunity, there is application timeline, and the application timeline record looks like this. So you'll have open date, close date, and release date. And you can build automation in the background to automatically open or close an application based upon this. With funding opportunities, there are typically instructions and descriptions that are associated with what this grants or funding opportunity is about, and provides details of the minimum and maximum funding amount. And for cases where you want the applicant to enter the budget, you'll need to associate this with a budget template. So in terms of object data, what we are looking at here is you have the program object, and you have all the funding opportunity objects that sits underneath the program, and also the application timeline as well to help you manage when the application opens and closes that's associated with the funding opportunity. And also this is the budget template that we had a look at on the funding opportunity record as well. And this is the one that we are talking about here, which allows the applicant to enter the proposed budget on the Experience Cloud website. When we look at the related list, you can see individual applications and funding awards, which we'll get to after this phase. So in here, we are talking about the Experience Cloud site template, which you can use to get details from the applicant when they are applying for a particular funding opportunity. So now moving to pre-award management, this is where you'll be collecting application details using the individual applications object. So when it comes to collecting applications, there is actually an out-of-the-box Grantmaking site template for Experience Cloud. They will allow you to set up an Experience Cloud site quickly to start collecting application information from the applicant. So you can do this in two ways. You can use OmniStudio OmniScript to build a guided path to complete a process, or you can also use a flow builder for simpler application forms. You can make use of the document checklists to collect the required documents from the grant seekers and route them to the appropriate staff for review and approval. So this can include things like driver's licenses, passports. So once the application has been submitted, all the information will be stored in the individual application records. And there's a few things that we need to remember about individual application object. So every individual application must be associated with an account. And in this case, we are talking about personal accounts here. So you do need to enable personal accounts in your org. For individual applications that need to have the budget component, you'll need to set up a budget template for the funding opportunity, and the applicant will have to submit the formatted budget through the Experience Cloud site. And as an option, you can use the preliminary application reference record to keep track of the draft applications before the applicant has submitted the application. And you can also, as an option, associate the individual applications with a case. And usually in Salesforce, this allows you to use the out-of-the-box case functionalities to describe stakeholder questions, issues, and requests. So you use case as a container for communication with an applicant or grantee, and you can use the standard Salesforce Service Cloud functionality. And if we take a look at the data model here, what we've just been talking about is the individual application here. So this has to be associated with the personal account, and you have the preliminary application reference to store draft information record if required, and you have the document checklist items to store the required documents for the individual application. And we talked about the budget template component here as well. So now let's move back to the notes, and we'll keep looking at the actual individual application record. So in individual application record, you can check the status, apply date, the funding opportunity that the individual application is applying for, requested amount, and name. You have the account and contact, and submitted status. And here are probably some of the more specific questions that are related to the application itself. In this case, funding request purpose, and you have a budget template here as well that the applicant will fill in, and you'll be able to look at the budget that's been submitted by the applicant. Now let's move on to application review. So once the application has been submitted, the grantmaker will check the form completion and review the application. Document checklists and action plans are actually quite useful to establish a standardized ways of carrying out the review. So in earlier part of the series, we talked about action plans, which are created from action plan templates. So these are basically pre-configured sets of tasks and document requirements, and a grantmaker can actually create an action plan from an action plan template on any individual application or other records to include a checklist for things that the grant seekers must complete. And we can use the review object to start collecting and store feedback about individual applications. Usually reviews are assigned internally to grantmakers team members. It can also be assigned externally to outside experts using an Experience Cloud site. And again, if you want to standardize the process review process, you create action plan templates for these records, and you can even use Flow OmniScript to create a guided review process as well. So the action plan templates in summary and action plans are quite useful for both the grantees and grant makers to ensure all the tasks are carried out in a standardized manner. So let's take a look at the data model for application review. So we talked about individual applications, how it's related to a funding opportunity, and during the review process, we'll be using this application review object over here. And we talked about the document checklist items and this action plan object here sort of sits on the side, and this can be used in any object with any objects that's listed in the target field on the action plan object record. So going back to this, so how do you actually create an action plan for individual applications? It's quite easy. If you go to the individual application record, click on New Plan for the action plan component. This will allow you to create an action plan for this individual application. Alright, let's take a look at what an application flow looks like from a grant seeker's perspective. So here is the portal to apply for the application for this particular government organization, and in here you can see a list of available funding programs and date and their description here. When you click on the funding program, here you can see more detailed information about this particular program. This one is about Relief and Reinvestment Grant. And when you want to submit an application, you will click on this, and this will bring you to the OmniScript, which allows you to fill in application details, and it provides a guided process for the applicant to fill up the form. So you fill up all the steps and all the information that's required. This will then provide you with a confirmation screen once you've submitted the application. Now let's take a look at how we can use Business Rules Engine in grantmaking. So we've talked about Business Rules Engine in detail in earlier part of the series, which is in the Industry Common Layer video. So if you want to know more about Business Rules Engine, please check that video out. But in summary, Business Rules Engine is a declarative way to allow you to build, test, execute complex business rules in the platform that allows you to work with complex calculations. So without business rules engines, you'll end up having to create different if else statements and also complex calculations in the code, which is very hard to maintain. So in this case, it's writing if else statements to look at the policy effective date, your household size, gross income, net income, and according to all of this, you then determine the eligibility. Now with business rules engine, you can basically put all of this if-else statements into a decision matrix table, and for your input variables, you have the household size. And once you put this household size in there, your decision matrix will have a lookup that basically return you with the household income limit and net household income limit. You can then use this to do further calculations, and depending upon this, you can determine whether something is eligible for food assistance or not. So this is what it looks like during simulation. You enter the household income, household size, and the net currency, and this allows you to do a simulation, and on the side it gives you some of the results and tells you whether someone is eligible or not, depending on the household size. Let's take a look at some other industry common layer tools that you can use in grant making. So first one here is Actionable Relationship Center, ARC. So this is an out-of-the-box tool that will allow you to build a relationship graph with objects that are important to your users. You can customize card names, display fields, and record actions, and users can easily navigate and engage with records during customer interactions. So this component here can be added as an LWC on the record details page. So in this case, you have an organization, which is a hospital, and underneath it you have a couple of individual applications that are associated with this account. So also one thing I want to add is that early on we talked about how individual application must be associated with a personal account. In this case, because you are applying for a business account or organization account, you can actually link the individual application with an account, which are also associated with a bunch of organization contacts as well. So it doesn't have to be strictly person account, it can be account and contact as well. When you click on this icon here, it allows the users to drill in and see what other objects are linked with this individual application. So when you click onto this, you can now see the funding award that sits beneath this individual application record. And so how do you actually set up Actionable Relationship Center? So this is actually in the setup. And when you search for Actionable Relationship Center, this will appear. So to create a new Actionable Relationship Center graph, click on New, and here you set up account as the first layer, just like this over here. And on the second layer, you need to set up individual applications, which is this here. And the third layer will be the funding awards. And you can specify what fields you want to display for each of the objects. And to add a new object, simply click on New, and if you want to show disbursements as well, you can easily do that here. And this will be what it looks like So once you add the funding disbursement, this can be shown and related to the funding award for the individual application. Another out-of-the-box industry common layer tool that's quite useful is the timeline. So it allows users to see data from objects as a sequence of events happening over time like this. And you can determine what information shows on the timeline by choosing the base or primary object that the related objects. So it supports both standard and custom objects. So in this example below, you have a bank, and you can see the award timeline that is already configured and that's added to the page layout here. And you can add multiple timelines here as well. So for example, you want to see the funding award timeline. You can switch to the funding award timeline here. And once you have switched it, you can actually filter this by the start and end date and the event type, and this will provide you with a different timeline list view, and shows all the related record as well, like funding disbursement, funding award requirements, and also gives you the ability to add the related record as well. So to configure the timeline, again, go to the setup, and here you can set up a bunch of global settings. You can set up the related objects that you want to display on the timeline. And here is how you set up the details and how you can apply for the filters to determine what objects to appear in your timeline. Another industry common layer tool that's quite useful for grant making is the OmniStudio document generation. So this basically allows you to generate documents from the records that you are on. There are two types, two ways that you can generate records: client side and server side. So the client side one is a synchronous process. The systems will wait until the document is generated. On the server side, it's an asynchronous process. And this allows the Salesforce system to do bulk documents, and you don't need to wait for the process to complete in order to use the system. So this is just one of the examples. If you want to create a document for funding award, later you enter the object ID, enter the document type, and whether you want PowerPoint or Word, and you can pick a template and specify the generation options, whether it's client side or server side, and specify other details as well. And this, it also gives you a preview of the document and tells you the disbursement schedule, due date, and the type. You can email the PDF or the Word and PowerPoint. So how do you actually set this up? You need to go to the OmniStudio document template designer, start a new template, specify the document template type, and you'll need to create a couple of data mappers to be able to fetch the record and also push the record to the template to be able to generate the document. Alright, so earlier on we talked about grantee budget. So basically users have the ability to create budget templates that are to be used by grantees when they submit their applications. And these budget templates can be associated at the funding opportunity level, and we've gone over the data model for this earlier. So what this means is that different funding opportunities can actually have their specific budget templates. So here is a funding opportunity record with all the descriptions written up, all the start date and end date and all the good details over here. So here is where you would associate the budget template to the funding opportunity record. And this is what a template looks like. You have all the basic details here, and the important part here is probably setting up the budget categories and also the periods. So in this case, you have consultants, others, admin expense, travel, salaries, and benefits, and this is for 2 years. And you can set up also in your budget categories, you can set up the sequence number as well, and this will determine how it shows up on the budget table over here. So if you set this up as sequence number 1, it'll show up on top, and because we've set up for 2 years, this is what the table looks like. So when the applicant goes on to the Experience Cloud applying for the individual application for a funding opportunity, they'll be able to use the budget template that you've created and enter their proposed budget for each of the budget categories across 2 years, and also specify the reasons for these numbers. And for once this is submitted in the internal view, this is what the individual application record looks like. You see this budget record here, which you can go into here and or you can just stay on the individual application record, and if you set up the related list or the tab component properly, you can actually have it display the budget LWC, and you'll be able to see what's being entered by the applicant here. Moving back to the Experience Cloud side, which is the applicant's view. So when you've populated all your budget, once you submit it, you'll see basically a pop-up window to confirm that you want to submit it. Moving on to the next phase, which is the Grantmaking Award Management phase. So this is where you dish out the awards and disbursements. And what you do here is you first go into the individual application object here, and to manage the decisions and funding awards, you go into here, and this is the related list for application decisions. You can click on New, and this will allow you to enter application details and also specify who's done the decision for this application here. Once you've done the application decision, if the decision is to be awarded, you can actually create automation in the background that will automatically create a funding award record. But you can also do this manually by clicking on the new button, and this will allow you to specify the decision day, start day of the award, end day of the award, and also the amount as well. And you can enter a budget to help you track off the funding award and specify who's being awarded the award. Again, this can all be done using Flow to help improve the automation and efficiency. So once this has been specified, this will come up in the related list under the individual application record. Now let's take a close look at the funding award record. So this is what a funding award record looks like. You'll be able to see what the funding award is associated with. So in this case, it's for this particular funding opportunity, the Food Systems Development Grant. And you'll specify the name of the award usually comes with a reference number, decision date, start, end date, the amount, and you can specify the budget here as well to help you track track your budget. You also have the information related to what application this funding award is awarded to, the awardee, and the contact. And when it comes to funding award, we're also talking about disbursements as well. So again, this can be done automatically using Flow, or you can do it manually by creating manual disbursement records. So what you do is you click on New and you specify the disbursement details and bank account information. They'll keep track of the funding disbursements. And this is what a disbursement record looks like. You can see that this is associated with this particular funding award, and this is the amount, and these details to do with the payment method type and the status as well. So let's talk about how we can manage funding award requirements. So quite often you'll require documents such as contracts, documents, reports from the grantee, and disbursements are actually can be dependent on these funding award requirements. So what you do is you again go to funding awards. In the funding award requirements, you can create this manually or using Flow. So this is what a funding award requirement record looks like. You specify the name and you'll have the funding award that the requirement is associated with, and also the disbursement that's dependent on providing this funding award requirement. And you have the submitted date, approval status, and this is usually what it looks like in detail. You have a bunch of descriptions, and in this case it's the interim report, and this will basically be submitted by the applicant, and this will be reviewed and approved, and the disbursement will then be released. Now let's talk about how we can track spending against the budget. So earlier we talked about budget allocations, and this is what a budget allocation record looks like. You have a budget allocation name, and here you will this will be associated with a budget, and also you'll be able to see these budget values here, and also funding disbursements. And when you look at this budget category value, so these are the values that you basically entered in the LWC table up here. So for example, if we look at personnel, you'll have this planned amount here. So this is pretty much what you see down here. So you can see the budget category and the planned amount. And you can also check for the funding disbursement as well. So this is actually the money that's going out to the applicant. And in this case, it's 50K has been scheduled. Alright, so now we've completed all the related records associated with the funding award. We have set up the requirements that's required to get the funding disbursements, and funding award amendments is probably the one that we haven't covered. So this is used in cases where the funding award details will need to be amended, for example, the amount and maybe some of the award description details. Alright, let's look at funding request. So this is actually coming from the Grants Management Managed package, where instead of funding opportunities, it's using the funding request object. And here you can see instead of program, it's using the funding program object. So something to keep in mind for the exam, that the object names are quite different, but not quite different, but they are different, but the use case is very similar. And it's got the requirements, and again, you can use the OmniScript to facilitate the gathering of applicants' information. Alright, let's take a quick look into Grantmaking site template. So we talked about earlier that in Salesforce PSS, you can use Experience Cloud to set up a site for the applicants to apply for grants and research about programs and funding opportunities. So in Salesforce, there's Grantmaking site template that you can use, which is out of the box, and you can configure this quickly to start offering grants and funding opportunities to the applicants. And this is what the template looks like. So by default, the template would give you a header, a homepage with a large hero image, and also you will be able to display key information here as well about how to apply, what this fund is about, and the applicants will be able to use the header to navigate to different spaces and pages to look at how their application is going, the available programs and opportunities. So once the site, the Experience Cloud site, has been configured, next you'll need to think about how the users will be managed and what they can see and change in terms of the records. So typically, you would allow the grant makers stakeholders to register and create user accounts and passwords on the site. And you'll typically have a registration page to get the grant makers started. So once they've logged in, you need to think about whether you give them the ability to edit their own user or organization profile, and you need to think about what records they'll be able to view and edit to get the job done. When it comes to funding opportunities, you'll need to think about who can actually have access to these funding opportunities. So you can make certain funding opportunities available only for registered users, and you can have some funding opportunities that are available for everyone, which will be guest users. And you need to think about what objects and fields that will need to be displayed on site. So for some of the more sensitive fields, they should only be visible to internal case management team. It's important that you think about these and making sure these are not visible on the Experience Cloud site. When it comes to collecting applications, as we talked about earlier, you can use OmniScript or the Flow Builder to set up an application form for the applicant to enter application-related details. So other things that you might also want to include is document checklist items that you might want the applicant to submit. So usually you'll provide them with a document checklist, and they'll need to go through these checklists and upload documents for each checklist. There might be tasks that you want them to complete, and this is where you can use the action plan tasks to help the users to to complete these tasks on a standardized basis for each applicant. You also probably want to ask a few questions on the application form, and you can do this when you build OmniScripts and the Flow Builder. You probably also want to build a knowledge base for frequently asked questions and add them to the site. And also think about collaboration between grant makers and stakeholders on your Experience Cloud site, so that reviewers can also log in to the Experience Cloud site to review these applications and work with internal stakeholders. Now let's talk about the experience from the grant seeker's perspective. So when they log in or when they go to your Experience Cloud site, they'll be interested to research about the grant opportunities that might be available to them. Once they've done their research, they might apply for a grant. And once they've applied for the grant, on the Salesforce side, and record will be generated, and the grant managers will be able to view the application. And this is where you'll be doing some collaboration to work with other team members to review and score the application. And depending on the review outcome, you might be awarding the applicant with some money and dispersing this money to their bank account. And typically, before awarding the grant to the applicant and dispersing the fund, there's typically a set of requirements that the applicant will need to fulfill. For example, providing reports or financial statements or verification details. And before all of the documents are submitted and approved, the disbursement won't be released. So there you go. That's in a nutshell how you can set up an Experience Cloud site and some of the considerations you need to think about for grant making. Alright, let's now go over the Trailhead notes. So the partner learning camp content, the Trailhead team, they've actually done a good job covering most of those contents in Trailhead. So I probably will go over my Trailhead notes quite quickly, as we've covered most of the details in the partner learning camp section. So I'll provide both of the links in the description below or comments below. So the first link is for the Grantmaking for PSS, and it provides an overview, lifecycle, and also how you set up the experience site template for Grantmaking. And we've covered a lot of this in the partner learning camp notes already. Second link here, this is actually about the Grants Management package, which was used for nonprofit cloud before Grantmaking becomes a core product for both nonprofit cloud and PSS. So just bear in mind that when it comes to the actual implementation, this module probably won't help you too much, because most of the orgs should be using Grantmaking now. But you might encounter for some of the older orgs where they've installed the Grants Management package before the Grantmaking capability is added to the Salesforce core product for PSS and nonprofit cloud. Alright, so let's take a quick look at Grantmaking. So we'll use this as a revision. So we'll start with the program object, which is what you'll use to check your funding programs in Salesforce. After you've created this, you'll use the budget object to define the program spending, and you'll start setting up the available grant opportunities for the program using the funding opportunities object. To track individual grant applications from start to finish, you'll use the individual application object, and typically you'll be setting up an Experience Cloud site for the applicants to be able to fill up the application form, which is usually built using tools like OmniStudio and Flow Builder. Once the applicant has submitted the form and answered the questions, you'll create individual application object, and now that it's in the Salesforce platform, the team will be using the application review object to capture the feedback, and you can standardize this part of the review process using Salesforce automation tools like action plans, document checklists, and approval processes. Now, once the review is complete, you'll need to make a decision on the application, and if the decision is that this application will be awarded, then you'll be checking the award details in the funding award object. Anything that you want to disperse to the grantee, you use the funding disbursement object. Any additional steps that the grantee will need to take, like providing interim or annual reports, you use the funding award requirement object. And you can check all the spending against the budget throughout this process. Let's now quickly go over the grant-making lifecycle, which we've covered already in Partner Learning Camp. So we'll start with the administrative phase, followed by pre-award, award phase, and post-award. So admin phase is where you work internally first to determine the program budgets and create funding opportunities for potential grantees. Next, you start collecting the applications. You then select the grantees and disperse the grants. After that, which enters the post-award phase, this is when you work with the grantees. You start collecting reports and analyze the results. So in the initial phase, which is the administrative phase, this is where you create a bunch of objects in Salesforce like program and budget, basically preparing your organization to start accepting applications. So once you've set the budget, you'll start creating funding opportunity object records, and usually these would include the grant description, the instructions for this application, the deadline, and when the grant actually starts and ends. And this is where you'll be preparing to set up your Experience Cloud site as well, where you can publish these funding opportunities for the applicants to review. And you can also set up budget templates for grant seekers who are applying for these opportunities. Moving to the next phase, which is the pre-award phase. So this is where you'll be managing the application information using the individual application object. So the information on this object is typically provided by the applicant via an OmniStudio or Flow Builder on your Experience Cloud site. So once you've collected the information after the applicant submitted the application, this is where you'll enter the award phase. And this is where you'll be working with the internal team to start reviewing the application submitted by the applicant and carry out the scoring using the application review object. after the review, and actually before we get to that, during application review, you can use out-of-the-box automation tools like action plans, document checklists, and approval processes to standardize your review process. After the review and scoring is complete, you'll be using the application decision object to track whether an application is denied or awarded. If the applications are awarded, you'll be using the funding award object to track the award, the amount, and the budget. And it's at this point that the funding award will become your single source of truth for the life of a grant. You'll be checking payments as part of the award through the funding disbursement object, which can sometimes depend on funding award requirements if there are documents that the grantees will need to provide before they can get disbursement of funding. After this is where it enters the post-award phase. This is where the money has been dispersed to the grantees and they are busy working towards their goals. So you'll be collecting progress reports regularly, and you'll be your grantees will be updating their budgets and submitting that regularly, and they'll be keeping submitting the funding award requirements records, and depending on whether they meet these funding award requirements, they'll get the funding disbursements during this phase as well. So typically you'll be using the funding award requirements to track the work on the reports, inspections, audits, and activities. And based on these activities, you decide whether to continue to give them the disbursements if they meet all the funding award requirements. So if anything that's changed, for example, scope timeline, you'll be checking these changes using the funding award amended object. And all of this can be used to all of this can be checked using the budget record. All right, so we've covered again most of this already, so we'll use this as a quick revision and a summary session. So you'll start setting up a program followed by a budget, and you'll need to think about the budget categories and the periods. And this is what you do in the administrative phase. And this is what a program looks like. You set up your budgets, and in the budgets, you set up various categories and budget periods. And this will allow you to have this table here, which can be entered by the internal team, or if you want to use this as a template for the applicant to populate, don't populate any values and associate this record on the funding opportunity object. Use budget allocation to start checking the budget during this entire life cycle of the grant making process. One thing for the exam that's quite important is that you cannot edit a budget once it's submitted. So make sure you've had some practical experience setting up the budget and play around. Make sure you know when you can edit the budget and when you won't be able to. Now, after you've configured the budget and the program, this is where you'll create the funding opportunities. So funding opportunities are basically the grants that your organizations will be able to offer. And it typically includes information such as the grant's description instructions on how to apply, details about the length and the application windows, and the grant period. So typically, once you've created these records, you'll be displaying these funding opportunity records on the Experience Cloud site for potential applicants to review and apply. For funding opportunities that come with an application timeline, which is quite a typical use case, you can use the application timeline object to set up the start date and end date. And also, you can also communicate the decision release date as well. So this is how you create a funding opportunity. You'll include some details over here to do with the funding amount, and if you want the applicant to populate a budget, you associate a budget template over here as well. For funding opportunities that come with a timeline, this is where you associate the timeline here on the funding opportunity record, and there's usually a program that the funding opportunity belongs. Moving on, after this, you'll be collecting and process individual applications. One important thing when it comes to grant-making records and the sharing of these records on the Experience Cloud site, we need to understand this compliant data sharing feature well when it comes to the implementation. I'll include the link in the description or comments below. So let's quickly go over this. So in Grantmaking, there is this tool that you can use called compliant data sharing. This basically allows developers, admins, or grant managers to control and monitor what data actually gets shared in the Experience Cloud site without writing complex code. So when it comes to grant-making records, if you want to share this securely, you need to go to the setup and enable compliant data sharing. So what this will allow you to do is that this will allow you to share records so that the grant seekers can add collaborators in Experience Cloud site to help complete the grant application. So this is quite useful when the application requires multiple grant seekers working together. It can also allow the grant managers to add specific applicants in Experience Cloud site for private funding opportunities that are not available for public users or for registered users. It also allows the grant managers to add grantees as a collaborator to manage funding awards. So let's quickly go over what happens when you turn compliant sharing on. So this will be quite important if you are doing the implementation. As far as the PSS exam goes, it doesn't go down to this much detail. If you would like me to do a video on how to implement compliant sharing, please leave in the comments below. But basically, after you've turned on the compliant data sharing, you'll get 3 additional objects in your object manager. And the important object here to know is the participant role. So this basically defines the available role for a parent object and an associated data access level. And what we are talking about here is after you turn on the compliant data sharing, you will be able to see this individual application participant object and other objects as well. And this will allow you to configure compliant data sharing. All right, back to the notes. So managing individual applications. There's a few things that might be helpful when it comes to managing individual applications. You have the budget document checklist. So this is quite useful when you want to collect required documents from the applicant and you want to route these document records to the appropriate staff for review and approval. Case, this is quite useful as well. Typically, you'll be using case to track communication with the applicant, and you'll be able to use Salesforce Service Cloud features for case management. And if you are using Experience Cloud site to collect information, you can actually have related preliminary application reference records that stores details about the draft application before they are submitted. Alright, now comes the review application phase. So there's a few things that will actually help you review the applications, especially for the internal team members. To set up a standardized review application process, you can use action plans and document checklists to ensure your internal team is following a standardized procedure when it comes to reviewing applications. Now, once the application has been reviewed, you'll start making a decision on whether the application should be awarded or not. And this is where you'll be using the application decision object. So once that's been decided, you can set up automation to say, hey, if the application decision value on the application has been selected to award, you can generate an application award record automatically. Alternatively, you can do this manually as well by going into individual applications, create a new funding award record. So this is what an application decision record looks like. And so in here, it's going to have the decision, in this case it's award, the comment, and also what the application is associated with for this application decision. Funding award. So once you've decided who gets awarded, you'll need the funding award record to keep track. And this will typically have an award number. You'll be associated with the funding opportunity, a budget record to help you check the budget, the individual application that's being granted the award, and the awardee details and the contact. Right, so after this, you'll be managing the disbursements. And to manage disbursements, again, you can create this automatically or manually by going into the funding award and create a funding disbursement record here. In funding disbursement record, there's typically details about the amount, the funding award that the disbursement is associated with, and details such as the method type and the date. Before getting the funding disbursements, there are typically requirements that the applicant will need to provide. And these can be things like passports, reports, etc. And this is where you use the Manage Funding Award Requirements object. In this object, you'll typically list out what the requirement is. In this case, it's an interim report, and you can clearly see that this requirement is associated with this funding disbursement and this funding award. So funding award requirements used as a record to keep track of the requirements that the applicants will need to meet before they get the disbursement. And typically this will have a status field, which when this has been reviewed and approved, the funding award disbursement will be dispersed to the person that's been granted the award. So how do you actually keep track of all of these awards and budgets? This is where you'll be using budget allocations. So budget allocations allows you to track against the budget, and also it allows you to keep track of the funding disbursements as well. Right, moving on, let's go to the Experience Cloud Site template. Again, we've covered this already. In Salesforce, there is out-of-the-box template that will allow you to set up Grantmaking site quickly. And when you set up the Grantmaking site, you need to think about security and how you'll be interacting with the users, what funding opportunities you want to be making available to different user types, and setting up a knowledge base for frequently asked questions, and think about how you want to share the records and collaborate with both external and internal stakeholders. And there you go. That's Grantmaking in a nutshell. All right, let's take a look at the data model for Grantmaking and grants management. This should make a lot more sense now, having gone through the examples and object models. So we'll start with the program object. The program object is associated with the funding opportunity. So the funding opportunity are basically the grants that are available underneath a program. When you look at funding opportunities, you see this funding opportunity participant, and this object will be available when you have enabled compliant sharing. And that goes the same with this individual application participant as well. So these two participant records will allow external users to be able to collaborate for funding opportunity records or individual application records. When we look at funding opportunities, there are usually timelines that will specify when this grant needs to be applied, the start date, the finish date, and when the decision will be made. And in terms of individual applications, this is where the applicant would typically log into an Experience Cloud site, select a funding opportunity, and answer all the questions on the form. Once the application has been submitted, it needs to be reviewed. Once it's reviewed, there will be a decision to decide whether the funding award will be given to the applicant. If the answer is yes, we want to give this applicant an award, then you'll be using this funding award object to keep track. And if there's money involved, you'll be using the funding disbursement object to keep track of the disbursements. Usually, before you can disperse the funding to the applicant, the applicant will need to provide documentation such as references, passport details, verifications before the funding disbursement can be released. If there's any changes during the application process, this is where you'll be using the funding award amendment to update the funding award scope or timeline, for example. And as we can see here, there's another funding award participant, and you'll be able to get this you'll be able to get this object when you have turned compliant sharing on. Next is budget management. The budget object allows you to set budget for a program, and sometimes a program can have multiple budgets as well. It also allows the applicant to provide their own budget, and this is done by having a budget template created and associate that on the funding opportunity record. In the budget, you have budget category and budget period. If you want to set the budget internally, you will populate the category values. So budget category values are basically the junction object between the two. So you'll enter an amount for a budget category, for example, consultant fees. And budget period can be Q1, for example. So this is where if you want to set the budget internally, you'll populate this value. If you want the applicant to provide the budget, you'll create a budget record, set your category and the budget period, but you'll leave this blank. And you'll go to the funding opportunity record and populate the budget template lookup field to this budget record, which does not have any budget category values, so that the applicant can enter their own values. Now, to track the actual budget during the entire grant making cycle, you will use the budget allocation object. So this allocation object is associated with the budget category value, and funding disbursement. So it has the ability to track what's been budgeted for and what's actually been disbursed. Now let's move on to the grants management package. So when we look at the grants management package, it's actually divided into 4 smaller modules. You have MPSP, the core CRM objects, grants management objects, and outbound funds. So the outbound funds module is more about dispersing of the funds and fund management. Grants management, this is more around inviting external users to collaborate on the funding request. And in Grantmaking, the collaborators are done by these compliance sharing objects such as individual application participant, funding opportunity participant as examples. The best way to read the data model is we'll start with the funding program. Underneath the funding program, you have funding requests. So these are the requests that are submitted by the applicants. And the funding requests will be associated with account. Account can have context and case associated with it. And depending on the review, whether it's being approved for an award or not, you'll have funding disbursements. And similar to grant making, you have the funding award requirements, but in the grants management world, you have the requirements. So the applicants will need to provide all the requirements before the disbursement can be made. In here, there's also budget management components as well, but as you can see here, it's not as extensive as the grant making budget management module here. You have the action plan as well, similar to what we've got over here, and document checklist as well. Before we finish up, I want to provide 2 important links for Salesforce help articles. First one is around the grants management managed package. Second one is around Grantmaking, which is the PSS core capability. So coming back to the grants management product documentation, this provides details as to how to set this up, which is probably not going to be very useful as most of the new orgs should be using Grantmaking for implementation. But for exam purposes, I will encourage you to have a quick go through of some of the links over here, such as how to use grants management. So in here, it talks about all these objects, such as funding programs, and how you can set this up. It also talks about other key objects as well, such as funding requests, and how you can create one, how you can set up different roles, etc., and manage requirements and disbursements. Now moving to Grantmaking help article. So this is actually quite useful as it contains a lot of good implementation details. So in here, it talks about different permission sets that we've also covered in the video. It talks about how you can set it up, how you can turn on Grantmaking, which you'll need to go to the setup, how you can set up the experience site, which we've covered as well. In here, in the setup section, it talks about a lot of very important implementation details, such as adding that budget component, that LWC, onto the page layout, how you can set up action plans and document checklists, some automation related to Grantmaking, how you can actually manage funding opportunities, budget management, how you can create budget category and period records, how you can track the budget spent in the CRM, and there's details about how you can actually review and manage these grant applications, manage funding awards with Grantmaking, and how you can monitor it as well. And that wraps up part 6 in our PSS series. In the next video, we'll dive into PSS data models and applications for employee experience, where I'll cover the data models and its use cases. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps more people discover free Salesforce study resources and motivates me to create more valuable content for our community. See you next time.